when you look at those things and you see that the ethics and the rules don't really apply.
Sounds like Burisma. Remember the company in Ukraine?
Wait, but if it was bad then,
that's my
why
question.
did it was bad then, why are you doing it now?
If
you're critical
I said it
as I
you guys.
was.
Because it has to do with the ballroom, right?
No,
but it does. And that's my
ballroom.
point. So there are rules and regulations and regulatory bodies that the Trump family doesn't believe applies to them. And so when we're talking about the commission, when you get rid of the commission so you can push through things, I think that it shows that you believe ethics don't.
In today's video, Bakari Sellers completely shuts down Betsy McCaughey on Newsnight, with Abby Phillip as the two clash in a fiery debate. Things heat up fast when Betsy tries to defend Trump's recent actions, like removing a federal architectural commission and blurring the lines between politics, business, and ethics. But Bakari steps in with solid facts that break down her points one by one. From Trump's suspicious Pentagon deals to his strange obsession with stamping his personal style on public spaces, Bakari reveals how all of this signals a serious decline in democratic values and accountability. So let's jump in and watch how Bakari Sellers takes apart Betsy McCaughey on Newsnight with Abby Phillip.
Well, I say, first of all, good riddance to this commission. It's a group of elitists who don't share the aesthetic or artistic tastes of most Americans.
They're architects.
For example, they are architects, and you know what? They're artistic.
I love the former lieutenant governor talking about elitists, but okay.
Cian, right, who was the chair of this commission until recently, is responsible for probably the ugliest public building in America, the new Obama Center in Chicago, which is this huge concrete, bulbous, misshaping structure that really mars the Chicago landscape. It looks like an ode to the gulag. So don't trust his taste. And Trump is abiding by what most Americans want, which is public architecture that is monumental, maybe gold, and patriotic. And I say go for it.
I mean,
that's what
I just want you to know she came prepared and loaded for bear for this segment.
She was ready.
So glad to see
She was ready to go.
Can I just say, all of this stuff makes me want to scream, because at least if you're going to consolidate this much power, at least be original. At least don't, you know, copy every single authoritarian who came before you, who also did, you know, every single one of them, Putin, Stalin, all of them.
Barack Obama adding a basketball court.
It went through federal review.
Say that I know what good taste is, I know what art is, I know what portraiture is, I know what poetry is, I know what music is. And so I'm going to determine what the nation hears, because my taste is the nation's taste.
But it's also a direct.
The personalization of it is just so utter.
You can clearly see what Julia Lowe is trying to highlight in this moment, because she isn't just talking about buildings. She's calling out something much deeper. On the surface, the idea of making architecture feel more grand and patriotic sounds harmless, even inspiring, until you notice what's actually driving it: control. Throughout history, powerful leaders haven't only used architecture to construct structures, but to project authority and shape a nation's identity in their own image. So when Betsy McCaughey brushes off experts as elitists, that's not some relatable pro-people stance. That's rejecting knowledge and expertise altogether. Architects, designers, and historians exist to make sure public spaces speak to everyone's story, not just one person's ego or nostalgia. And let's be honest, Trump's version of monumental typically means louder, bigger, and centered around glorifying himself, not celebrating the country. That's why Julia's anger feels justified, because this debate isn't about style, it's about motive. When a government tries to dictate what beauty looks like for an entire nation, that becomes dangerous territory, and that's how you end up with buildings that feel like propaganda instead of public service. Even the claim that Trump's taste reflects what everyday Americans want doesn't match reality, because surveys by the American Institute of Architects show people actually value variety in design, buildings that honor local culture, creativity, and community identity. When one vision gets elevated above all others, that isn't democracy, it's design by force. And Julia is right. This debate isn't really about architecture at all. It's about how slowly and quietly a country's creativity, diversity, and checks on power can fade if only one aesthetic and one voice gets to define what a nation should look like.
Really unoriginal.
There is I've used through line twice tonight, but there is a direct through line between just the destruction of impediments in their way and the fact that rules, ethics don't really govern the Trump White House. And before you take umbrage to it, let me tell you what my through line is. I think when you look at reports that the Trump Corporation this year has made over $850 million already, 800 million just from a crypto coin, that foreign governments have put money in to influence what's going on in this country. When you look at the fact that they are Don Jr., for example, who doesn't necessarily have a skill set, but he sits on the board of a drone company that he invested $4 million in, which just won a Pentagon contract. When you look at those things and you see that the ethics and the rules don't really apply.
Sounds like Burisma. Remember the company in Ukraine?
But if it was bad then,
that's my
why
question.
did
Did you have-
why are you doing it now?
You're critical
I said it
as
earlier,
I
you guys-
was.
Because it has to do with the ballroom, right?
No,
But it does. And that's my
that's my
point. So there are rules and regulations and regulatory bodies that the Trump family doesn't believe applies to them. And so when we're talking about the commission, when you get rid of the commission so you can push through things, I think that it shows that you believe ethics don't matter. And so, yeah, I'm glad you brought up Burisma because that was a talking point for 4 years. And you know what? If Hunter Biden committed something unethical, whatever, it was wrong and bad. But if I can say that, why can't you say that it's wrong?
I don't see anything unethical yet. I haven't heard any.
You don't know that Donald Trump Jr. sits on a board right now that he invested $4 million in. They got a Pentagon contract.
What about
Or
the fact that
the
the
members
president
club.
just? What about the fact that
What I'd like to say
what
is
about the
that-
fact that the president just pardoned the head of Binance, and now all of a sudden that very same company, now able to operate fully in the United States, is promoting the Trump crypto platform. So that is also a thing that literally just happened.
Can I
in the
come-
last
or
month.
Donald Trump
Jr. or Donald Trump Jr. Sorry,
It's honestly wild how Betsy McCaughey keeps dodging every real concern by shouting, "What about Hunter Biden?" Like that's some kind of magic shield that automatically excuses Trump's ethical mess. What Bakari Sellers and Abby Phillip are pointing out here isn't about party loyalty. It's about holding power accountable, because you can't brag about draining the swamp while happily swimming in it. The Trump family's mix of private business interests and public power isn't some rumor. It's documented, with multiple reports showing Trump-connected companies bringing in hundreds of millions from foreign entities during his presidency, and many of those deals raising serious questions about conflicts of interest and possible violations of the Emoluments Clause. And that crypto situation Abby mentioned isn't tinfoil hat stuff either. It shows how political influence is being turned into profit right in front of us, where a former Binance leader gets a pardon and suddenly the crypto world starts pushing Trump-branded tokens. That's not patriotism, it's profit packaged in nationalism, and it smells like corruption. When public office turns into a family business, transparency dies. Which is exactly why Bakari's point about ethics boards being dismantled matters so much. Those systems exist to stop this blur between governing and self-benefiting. Once you tear down oversight, you open the door for unchecked power, and that's how democracies slowly fall apart. The funniest part is how Betsy calls liberals elitists, while ignoring how Trump's inner circle is cashing in and pretending to stand for regular people. Even though everyday Americans could never dream of affording $500,000 club memberships. Abby and Bakari are right. This isn't leadership, it's profiteering dressed up as populism.
Cannot
Or
comment.
Donald Trump Jr. opening up an exclusive members-only club where he and other Trump family members socialize, and the cost of membership is $500,000. Speaking of everyday Americans who
Right.
have half a million dollars to spare in a
Pretty
club
pricey.
membership.
But let me ask you
So
something.
is that okay?
Do you think that the president, who's
access to the
empowered by the
president's
Constitution
children?
to control the armed forces, shouldn't have the power to build a ballroom?
He should have all the power. He should do whatever he wants.
I mean,
Like
I'm
a
just
dictator.
saying,
It'll
it
be
seems
great.
ridiculous.
Let me just
I
play
think
this
what's
because
clear is that like none of the rules actually matter, right? Like how fragile our democracy really
Well, they
is.
matter for
how
our
the
perceived
rules-
enemies.
But
Well-
like this is the thing. Like if the administration decides, you know what, we don't want to follow the rules. We're going to do whatever we want. There really aren't
Guardrails.
guardrails.
So
exactly.
Julia brought
This
up
commission did not
earlier.
have the power to
Julia
stop
brought
the
up
ballroom.
earlier in the
care
conversation
that
that
much
she
about the
thinks
ballroom,
that
gotta
what
be
this is
honest.
all about is Trump doesn't want to leave. He's building, these sort of edifices that he wants to enjoy for a long time. He's also been asked about and talked about having a third term, and here's what he said on Monday about that.
I haven't really thought about it. We have some very good people, as you know, but I'm I have the best poll numbers I've ever had. I would love to do it. I have my best numbers ever. It's very terrible. I have my best numbers. If you read it, am I not ruling it out? I mean, you'll have to tell me. All I can tell you is that we have a great group of people, which they don't.
As with a lot of things with Trump, he could just say the Constitution bars me from having a third term, and he won't say it, which kind of feeds into what Julia was saying earlier today.
I think he likes that we're talking about this right now. I mean, but look, as far as the ballroom goes, Trump has had a bee in his bonnet about this ballroom since the Obama administration, when he said that he reached out to David Axelrod, wanted to give Obama $100 million, was a lot less then. You're talking about that earring. You wanted to give Obama money to build the ballroom. He's wanted to do it since then. And in another Washington Post article, there was reporting that Biden and Obama staffers were saying, we need this.
Yes.
People were in porta potties.
And look, porta
And I gotta
potties,
say,
imagine
to
four
hear
dignitaries in porta potties.
the outrage from the left, though, it feels extremely ironic that these are the same people celebrating statues being torn down of George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, and now there's concern about erasing history. It kind of feels like the outrage is all over.
Well, let me just say that I wasn't a big statue taker downer. That wasn't my ministry. I wasn't
Speaking for himself.
I wasn't a big.
But can I just? Here's the thing about the ballroom and this
Robert E. Lee
commission.
doesn't belong up.
I wonder
my
if there is any reasonable point to make that there should be somebody who has some context for history and for architecture that takes a look at a plan for a ballroom that is supposed to be bigger than the actual White House itself, and what that will do to the structure, to the landscape of the White House compound.
It's honestly kind of unbelievable watching Betsy McCaughey and Linda Mohan act like the presidency is some private playground where Trump can just do whatever he wants, completely forgetting that the Constitution they keep praising was literally created to stop one person from having unlimited power. Abby Phillip and Julia Ioffe are right to sound the alarm, because when leaders blur the line between serving the public and serving themselves, democracy stops being about governing and starts being about personal gain. What makes it even more concerning is how normal this behavior has started to feel. Like it's no big deal when a president casually jokes about staying for a third term, even though the 22nd Amendment clearly forbids it. And that's not harmless humor. That's testing limits. Just like other leaders around the world who once joked about extending their power before actually changing the rules. So no, it's not dramatic to take that seriously. And let's not ignore the ethical warning signs either. Because this whole ballroom situation isn't about state tradition. It's about legacy, image, and ego. And when oversight boards get pushed aside and architectural review processes are ignored, that's not just a style preference, that's pushing accountability out of the picture. Experts exist, so public resources aren't misused, and dismissing them as elitists is just a convenient trick to avoid being questioned. Meanwhile, Betsy and Linda shifting the conversation to statues and culture wars is classic misdirection, because it's easier to stir outrage than admit that Trump's team keeps bending, bypassing, and breaking the rules. Julia and Abby are right to call that out, because if nobody speaks up, the whole idea of limits on presidential power eventually becomes meaningless.